My husband knew I was pregnant, but he still kicked on my belly. That day he shattered my trust and my heart. My name is Jessie, and I once believed my life was perfect. An amazing job, a loving husband, and a supportive family. But behind the smiles and stability, I uncovered betrayal that shattered my world and changed everything. My name is Jessie, and I once thought I had everything in perfect order. I held a respected position as head of marketing, had a loving husband, Joan, and enjoyed a financially secure, stable life. I felt a sense of pride in managing our mortgage payments independently, which added to my sense of accomplishment. Family was at the heart of everything, and John's younger brother Felix, along with their mother Regina, were always a part of our. Shaving lost their father years ago, the brothers' devotion to their mother deeply impressed me. It was a beautiful bond, and it made me admire John even more for his loyalty to his family. Regina initially seemed to approve of me engaging me in conversations about my work at family gatherings, often commenting with an odd marketing. Sounds important. It was comforting to feel welcomed and appreciated by John's family, and I looked forward to becoming a true part of their tight-knit circle. The early years of our marriage were filled with happy weekends, festive meals, and spontaneous family game nights. On Thanksgiving at Regina's stands out in my memory, where the laughter and chatter create a inviting atmosphere that made me feel like it really belonged. However, things began to shift during a New Year's Eve party at Regina's house while I was in the kitchen refilling my wine glass. I overheard a conversation that started to change my view. Regina was making fun of Clara's affordable dress in the living room, mocking her as a single mother who was trying too hard to fit in with the elites. This moment made me assess the family dynamics. I had once admired what I had initially seen. A harmless teasing began to reveal a much more cruel side over Tim. Regina's started to gather with John and Felix to whisper and laugh about various family members and friends, making snide comments at other expense. It became harder and harder for me to ignore. One Easter Sunday, I reached my breaking point. Regina was casually criticizing our relative's financial choices, and I could no longer stay silent. I stood up and confronted her, hoping to defend those who were the target of her subtle bullying. The room went quiet, and Regina, with a biting tone, dismissed my concerns, suggesting that I was overreacting. In that moment, I turned to John, hoping for his support, but his lack of response was crushing. I had once seen these family gatherings as warm and loving, but now I began to see the undercurrent of cruelty beneath it. After John's disappointing reaction, family events became increasingly difficult for me. I often found myself sitting alone nursing a drink while John stayed by his mother's side. He would occasionally glance at me with an apologetic look, but never did he step away to offer the support I desperately needed. One evening, after enduring yet another uncomfortable dinner, I confront John. "Why can't you ever stand up to her?" I asked, my frustration spilling over. John, looking exhausted, ran a hand through his hair. "She's my mother. Eva, what do you want me to do? I want you to tell her she's being cruel. I want you to stand by me." I insisted, but I never did, and as time passed, I began making excuses to avoid these painful family gatherings. Whether it was a sudden work emergency or migraine, I would find any excuse to escape the harsh whispers and cold stares, just as it thought our situation couldn't become more strained. Life threw a significant twist our way. I was pregnant. Discovering the pregnancy left me with a mix of emotions, holding the test with shaking hands and calling out for John, who came rushing, concerned, painting his features when I showed him the test. This reaction, a mixture of shock and relief, pulled mine to a brief hope that perhaps this new life might mend the growing fissures between us. However, the pregnancy proved to be anything but easy. It faced constant nausea and dizziness, with the looming threat of miscarriage hovering over me, forcing me to be dressed and eventually quitting my job. As my condition worsened and my eyesight began to deteriorate, but potentially permanent complication during this vulnerable time, I felt John drifting further away of 10, returning home late, if at all, leaving me to face my challenges alone. The day of my scheduled C-section arrived unexpected. Due to my vision issues making natural birth too risky, lying on the operating table, filled with able end of fear and anticipation, I asked for John, only to be told by a nurse that he had chosen to wait outside. The surgery itself went smoothly, and hearing my son's first cries was a transcendent moment, filling me with an overwhelming rush of love. However, the joy was short-lived as John eventually appeared in the recovery room, his discomfort and annoyance barely concealed. "Ava, we need to talk. This isn't right," the began abruptly, his words dismissing the necessity of my surgery and lamenting the presence of men during childbirth as against the norm. Struck a deep chord of pain within me. Stormed out, claiming the hospital environment was too much for him. I was left alone, reeling not only from his words, but also from the reality of our situation. The subsequent weeks were a haze of sleepless nights and constant feedings, with John's presence becoming rare, or leaving me to navigate the challenging waters of new motherhood by myself ever since our son was born. John barely helped with his care and often complained, "Can you shut him up?" He growled. A sore baby cried through the night. "I'm trying," I'd reply, my voice heavy with exhaustion. He unteething, "Johnny thirch him." But John had no patience for it. All you do is focus on the kid. What about me? What about our sex life? I was astonished by his lack of understanding and compassion, especially as I was still recovering from major surgery and running on minimal sleep as the weeks turned into months. John's dissatisfaction only grew on evening while I was trying to soothe our fussy 7-month-old. He bluntly stated, "You need to go back to work." I was shocked. "What but the baby?" I began. "We hire a nanny." He interrupted, "We can't keep living like this. Jessie, we need the money," despite wanting to argue that our son needed and that I wasn't ready to return to work. The resolute look in his eyes silenced me. With a heavy heart, I began job hunting. Finding work with my compromised vision was challenging. I eventually secured a position at a smaller company, although the pay was less than before. When I informed John, his response was predictably dismissive. "That's it," he scoffed. Paying a nanny for this." Tears welled up in my eyes. "I'm doing my best." "John, it's not easy with my eyesight." I pleaded. "Excuses," she muttered, walking away. This marked the beginning of my new reality, rushing to work each morning, guilt gnawing at me. I left my baby with the nanny, struggling through the day with my limited vision, and then coming home to her resentful husband, a son who desperately needed my attention. Time passed in a blur of work, childcare, and escalating attention at home. Before I knew it, 3 years had gone by since my son's birth. Despite the difficulties, I cherished him deeply and found joy in his milestones. Family gatherings continued to be stressful, particularly because of Regina's behavior. She would perform the role of the doting grandmother when others were watching, but her disinterest was obvious. "Come to grandma," she'd coo, sweet voice, arms outstretched towards my son. Yeth would cling to me, turning his face away from this woman. He barely knew Regina's expression was sour. "What have you been telling him about me?" she has said accusingly. "You're turning my grandson against me." I try to explain, wary. "He just doesn't know you well. Regina, if you visited more often." But she would cut me off. "Don't you dare blame this on me," and storm off to complain to John. On an ordinary Tuesday morning, my world was once again thrown off balance. Holding a pregnancy test, my heart raced as I saw the positive result. A wave of fear washed over me. My first pregnancy had been fraught with complications, and my health had been severely affected. Could my body handle another one? As I calculated the timing, I realized I was already well into my first trimester. It felt as though the decision had been made without my full awareness. With shaking hands, I called John at work to share the news. His response was sharp and impatient. "What is it?" "John," I began, my voice faltering. There was a long pause on the other end, followed by a dismissive tongue look. "Jessie, I'm busy. We'll talk later. Just Aunt, quit your job, okay? We can't afford that." The line went dead, leaving me staring at my phone, feeling more alone than ever. Fortunately, this pregnancy wasn't as difficult as my first. The morning sickness was manageable, and my vision stayed stable, allowing me to continue working. I was determined to provide for our growing family, but as my belly expanded, the gap between Joan and me seemed to grow wider. He spent more time this mother's house and often came home late. One evening, feeling drained from managing our toddler in the pregnancy, I asked John for help. As she located in the door, "Hey, could you read him a story? I'm really tired," I asked, hoping for a little support. John glanced at us. "The Nathis watch can," I promised. "Mom, I'd help her move some furniture. Don't wait," he said, and without another word he was gone, leaving me alone with our son and tears in my eyes. By the time I reached my 7th month of pregnancy, Thanksgiving was approaching. Guests began to arrive in the afternoon, including John and Mary, who immediately started helping. The house buzzed with the warmth of conversation and laughter. Just before dinner, the doorbell rang again, and it was Felix, John's younger brother. Except he wasn't alone. "Everyone, this is Serafina," Felix said, introducing his fiancée. The mood in the room instantly brightened with congratulations. Regina showed up shortly afterward, and her face lit up when she saw Serafina during dinner. She lavished attention on Serafina, asking about her job. "As a manager at a national bank." "How prestigious," Regina exclaimed, clearly impressed, and in a louder voice for everyone to hear. Regina added, "Serafina here makes $220,000 a month now. That's the kind of daughter-in-law I've always dreamed of." Smart, beautiful, successful, her words, stunned especially when she shot a pointed look in my direction. Adding, "Unlike some people who can only pop out babies and breed poverty." I felt my cheeks burn with humiliation. Mary bristled next to me, clearly ready to defend me, but I gently stopped her, not wanting to escalate the situation. Regina didn't stop there with a syrupy sweetness. She continued, "Why don't we all head to that new restaurant downtown? My treat, of course." Before I knew it, Regina, John, Felix, and Anna were heading for the door. John didn't even glance back. The cheerful mood of the evening evaporated, and soon the other guests made their excuses to leave. Only John and Mary stayed behind, their presence a quiet support in the now silent house. I declined their offers of help, insisting that they also none. Edid Torrestance they left. I sank into the couch, overcome with tears, as the hours trickled by my sobsicode through the quiet house, my hand resting on my growing belly, lost in thoughts of how my life had spiraled to this point. It was nearing dawn when I heard the front door creak open. John stumbled in, reeking of alcohol and cigarette smoke, without a word, heading straight to our bedroom with trembling hands. I picked up my phone and scrolled through social media. They're captured in a series of photos were Regina, John, Felix, and Serafina, all smiles, at an upscale nights. Loved the caption, "Stung best Thanksgiving ever with my real family." As my due date neared, a mix of excitement and anxiety filled me. The doctors had scheduled another C-section given the short interval since my last. Despite trying to focus on the arrival of our new baby, doubts about John clouded my thoughts on cold winter afternoon. In August, John unpacking bags full of summer clothes, confused. I asked what all this, just saw a good sale. Thought I'd update my wardrobe, he replied, avoiding my gaze. It didn't quite add up, but with the baby on the way, I pushed my suspicions as Ida had been saving diligently, ensuring we had enough for the mortgage bills and even a babysitter for our 4-year-old. Thankfully, my workplace had approved 3 months of unpaid leave 5 days before my scheduled C-section chaos erupted. I was resting when John and Regina burst through the door, urgency in their steps, following them to our bedroom. I found John hurriedly packing the new clothes. "John," said, my voice rising with panic, "what are you doing?" "We're all going to Felix's wedding in Hawaii," he replied curtly. "But my C-section is in 5 days. Who's going to take care of our son?" I protested. "You'll manage, you always do," John said coldly, zipping up his suitcase. Before I could utter another word, he and Regina were out the door, leaving me in a stunned silence. Reality hit me like a tidal wave. Frantically, I checked our joint account to empty. All the money I had saved was gone. With shaking fingers, I called John. What he snapped when he finally answered. "The money. All our savings. Where is it?" he stammered after a pause. His cold laughter filled me. "Or weeded it for Felix's wedding gift. Don't be so greedy, Jessie." Then the line went dead sud, and a sharp pain shot through my abdomen. Looking down, is all a puddle forming at my feet. My water had broken grip through me as I realized the imminent risk. Tommy Prek sections car, clutching my phone with one hand and my belly with the other. Idealed emergency services. The hospital was a whirlwind of activity, doctors shouting, machines beeping. I awoke hours later to the gentle beeping of monitors, Mary's tear stains hovering over me. "Avashu," whispered, squeezing my handy. "You're okay, the baby's okay." Slowly, the reality of what had happened set in. I had nearly lost my life. My baby had nearly been lost 5 days after my emergency C-section. I was feeling surprisingly resilient, both physically and emotionally. The doctors were impressed with my recovery and promptly gave me the green light to head home during this time. John hadn't bothered to call on Sanat to check if I was alive, nor to inquire about his news on at that moment. I realized our marriage had irrevocably broken down. I reached out to John and Mary, asking if I could stay with them temporarily. They immediately welcomed me, in my boys offering not just a place to stay, but the emotional support I desperately needed, as they do on their grandsons. It took the opportunity to start researching divorce lawyers, while gathering necessary financial documents. A week after leaving the hospital, John finally called, ignored his first 5 calls, answering only on the 6th. "That tempt, where the hell are you? Why aren't you at home?" he demanded, his voice a mix of anger and confusion. Calmly, I replied, "I'm at my parents' house with our sons. I filed for divorce, CB." His reaction was a mixture of disbelief and mockery. "Divorce? Are you kidding me after everything I've done for you?" He laughed bitterly. "Everything you've done," I countered, anger rising like abandoning Merit before I gave Earth or stealing our savings. "So get over it," the scoffed dismissively. "I'll pay you back, no problem. In fact, I don't even want to see you again. Do you know why? Because I'm going to Barich." He rambled on about a job offer from Felix's new wife, Serafina, who had promised to make him wealthy beyond belief through a new financial venture you never believed in. "Jessie," he spat, "you always held me back. Well, guess what? I'm free now. And you're just a loser who can't see potential when it's right in front of her." The divorce proceedings were surprisingly swift. John didn't conti. Too much. Here turned the money he had taken and agreed to pay the money, since I had been the one making the mortgage payments. As evidenced by years of bank statements, the judge awarded me the house without hesitation. The day I moved back into what was now my house, John was there packing his last belongings. She sneered as I entered with our baby and our toddler by my side. "Enjoy this dump. While you can, he Jared carrying a box. I'll be in a mansion soon, swimming in cash. You'll see what you missed out on. Esha left. A profound sense of relief washed over me. The house felt larger, brighty. Ran free from the shadow of his presence. A year and a half later, life had settled into a new rhythm for me and my boys. I had returned to work and found a balance between my career and motherhood. It wasn't always easy, but we were happy, healthy, and thriving. The non-another ordinary. Tuesday, my phone buzzed with a news alert that made my heart race. Low banker exposed as fraud, leaves family in ruins. As I read the article, I couldn't believe my eyes. The story revealed that Serafina had been running an elaborate scam. She had convinced John, Felix, and Regina to invest in a ficti on-al financial company, urging them to take out massive loans, leaving them in financial ruin. They had even mortgaged Regina's house, pouring every penny they had into this non-existent ventures. Serafina, it turned out, wasn't a banker at all. The offices she had shown them was merely rented space, a facade for her deceits. He disappeared with millions, leaving nothing but forged documents and shattered lives. To make matters worse, they found out they had also taken out an additional loan to Felix and Serafina, lavish wedding in Hawaii. With every wedding, John had abandoned us to attend. As I processed the devastating news, a flood of emotions rushed: shock, disbelief, and, if I'm being honest, a small sense of vindication. The fallout was catastrophic. Unable to repay their massive debts, they lost everything: Regina's house, their cars, an event, their personal belongings were seized by creditors. They were left with nothing but crushing financial obligations. I learned from others that Regina had resorted to working as a cashier, barely making enough to cover a modest apartment and groceries. Jonah and Felix found themselves in dire straits, their dreams of wealth and success utterly shattered. I couldn't help but feel a deep sense of relief that I had divorced John when I did, sparing my children and me from the financial devastation that had engulfed his family. Just when I thought I had moved on from all the pain and turmoil, my phone rang. It was Regina's number. Against my better judgment, I answered. Jessie. Regina's voice came through, sounding timid, a far cry from her usual authoritative tone. "Need your helps," she pleaded, asking if they could stay with us. "The children need their father and grandmother," she insisted. "You can't turn your back on family in times like this." It took a deep breath, memories of the past flooding back, the Thanksgiving insults, the times I was left alone while pregnant and struggling, dull the moments they belittled and dismissed me. "Family," Ed, my voice is steady. "You weren't concerned about family when you left me alone, pregnant and in danger. You weren't concerned about family when you helped steal my savings. You weren't concerned about family when you insulted me." Regina tried to interrupt, but I pressed on. "I'm sorry for what you're going through, Regina, but I'm not responsible for the choices you, Jonah, and Felix made. My priority is my children, and I can't expose them to the instability you've brought up on yourselves. Please don't contact you, Sag." A ended the call and immediately blocked her number. As I put down the phone, a sense of relief washed over me. It was finally truly over. Thank you for joining me on this journey. If my story moved you, share your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like, share. Stay tuned for more heartfelt and inspiring stories.